I talk about hypocrisy and rage farming a good bit, especially in my home state of Alabama, and this next story is definitely that. I talked about it a few times last summer when it first happened, but recently Kyle Whitmire of AL.com wrote an article that brought to light some details that I didn't even know that made me almost bruise my forehead from it. So sit right back and listen to this tale. The Invisible Histories Project is a group that collects LGBTQIA plus stories from people across the South and its history. And 2 years ago, they gave a presentation at the Alabama Department of Archives and History on LGBTQ history in Alabama. And there were no problems. There were no issues. This past summer, they gave another presentation at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. And this time, the people who have never had a problem with these kind of things all of a sudden had a problem. Specifically, this Timu Raisin Brand son, who is Alabama State Senator Chris Elliot. When Chris Elliot found out there was going to be a presentation that had happened before on LGBTQI history in Alabama at the Alabama Department of Archives and History, he called the Invisible Histories Project's main person and asked why taxpayer money was being used to talk about these kind of things. And the manager told him that no tax money was being used. It was being paid for by a grant from the federal government. And Chris Elliott said he didn't really care. He still wanted the event canceled. The people who say that removing statues is trying to cancel history wanted history to be canceled. Well, Chris Elliott was furious, and in the next legislative session, he tried to strip $5 million of funding from the Alabama Department of Archives and History. But remember, no taxpayer money was used for this event. It was just punishment for the Alabama Department of Archives and History allowing a group to talk about gay stuff, I guess. So this year he's going to try another tactic, but this time, instead of trying to strip funding, he is going after the board of the Alabama Department of Archives and History. In a bill pre-filed for the 2024 session, Elliot would change the Archives governance from a self-nominating board to one controlled by the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Alabama House and Senate leaders. All of the 21 current board members will be fired on June 1st, 2024. Those board members include folks like Montgomery civil rights attorney Fred Gray, who knows a thing or two about Alabama history because he made it. Chris Elliott said, if you ain't gonna do what I say to do, then I'm gonna put people in there who will do what I say to do. They're one of the few, if not only, self-perpetuating boards in the state of Alabama that does not answer at least to elected officials and by extension to the people of the state of Alabama and simply reappoints itself over and over and over again, he said. And you gotta wonder, is that good governance? There are several other boards in the state of Alabama that does things that way, but Chris Elliott has not filed any bills to change the way they do things. But here comes the twist with the Alabama Department of Archives and History's board. The board does nominate its members, but those nominations then go before the Alabama Senate, where Elliott serves for up or down votes, much like Supreme Court nominees go before the United States Senate. Elliott didn't like any of those prospective board members. He could have voted against them. In fact, he's had the opportunity 20 times since he became an Alabama State Senator in 2018. In the last 4 years, Elliott voted to approve all of the people he now wants to fire. Elliott approved 3 of those nominees this year, just 2 weeks before he took an interest in the LGBTQ stuff. And on top of that, every co-sponsor of the bill that Chris Elliott filed to change the way the board is appointed, every single one of them voted for every appointee that they now want to fire. Hypocrisy and rage farming in a nutshell. Hallelujah and roll tide.